This is 1410 by Jakub Różalski, and it is the first of 4 paintings in this video. What ties all 4 together is a habit Różalski keeps coming back to across his historical works. He takes a force that actually existed, a religious order or an invading fleet or even an empire, and he paints it at the size it occupied in the memory of the people who had to live through it. Before we start, his socials and art shop are linked in the description, so go support him directly, since these videos would not exist without his art. The painting 1410 was published in September of 2015, and by Różalski's own description, it depicts the Battle of Grunwald, where the Polish and Lithuanian armies broke the power of the Teutonic Order. The painting's composition reads in 3 depth bands, and in the foreground, with his back to us, is the Polish knight Scythe, and we will get to his lore and importance later. We only see him from behind, so the painting has to tell us who he is through the symbols on his clothing. On his back he bears the Selima coat of arms, and in his left arm we see a red shield carrying that same griffin. The middle band is the army. Between Scythe and the giant stands rows of infantry and cavalry with raised spears and a few banners, and they are fading into the fog the further back they go. In the background is the giant. He is a Teutonic knight in a white surcoat bearing a gold cross, the plate beneath it picked out in gold filigree with a belt of round gold studs at the waist. A horned great helm is close where a face should be, and a few crows circle the head. In his right hand he holds a sword, and a crucifix with a small victim on it hangs from the rear end of the weapon, which is just such a cool detail in my opinion. The sword points down towards the ground. The giant's back is rounded and his head is lowered, so the whole posture reads as a body about to fall, which is a nice little detail in regards to depicting an empire being defeated, which is what happened at the Battle of Grunwald. Now let me give Scythe his background, because the choice to put him at the front of a Grunwald painting is deliberate. He was actually on the field that day, fighting under the Krakow banner, and he had given something up to Peter. When the war broke out in 1409, he was in the service of the Hungarian king, and he left that service to come and fight for Poland. He was counted among the Polish knights who contributed to the victory that day. Born around 1379, he served as both a soldier and a diplomat under the Polish king who led the Polish side at Grunwald. He won tournament after tournament across Europe before dying in 1428, covering a retreat against the Turks at Golubac. What outlasted him though was his reputation. In Poland he became the model of what a knight should be, dependable to the point that Polish scouts still swear an oath to be as dependable as Scythe. Now, regarding the battle behind both figures, on one side were the forces of the Polish king and his cousin the Lithuanian Grand Duke, somewhere around 29,000 men, and on the other side the army of the Teutonic Order under its Grandmaster Ulrich von Jungingen, and his army consisted of nearly 21,000 men. By the start of the 15th century, the Teutonic Order was widely reckoned among the wealthiest and best organized military institutions in Europe. For 2 centuries, it had run the Northern Crusades and built a state of its own, reaching up the eastern Baltic coast. Now, hold on to that detail about the Baltic, because it is exactly where the next painting picks the Teutonic Order up, but more on that later. The Battle of Grunwald was the morning Poland and Lithuania finally pushed back. Von Jungingen died on the field with most of the Teutonic Order's senior leadership. The Teutonic state held on afterward, but never recovered the power it had before. Anyway, let's follow the Teutonic Order back into the forest a couple of centuries before the Battle of Grunwald, while it was still standing strong. The painting Starza comes out of Różalski's Wolfpack world, also called the Cursed Knight. The painting is set during the Northern Crusades, and his caption for it is a single line: "When you try to act like a real knight, but you are a savage inside," and we'll get to why that caption is very important later. The painting's composition splits into the same 3 depth bands again. In the foreground is the hooded figure the caption is about. He is named Juran, and if you watch the werewolf videos, you already know what Różalski means by savage. He kneels in the snow with his back to us, wrapped in a dark cloak, with a sword and a red shield slung across his back. He seems like he's already transitioning into a werewolf, which is given away by his hands that have gone clawed and wrong. The shield on his back is the primary spot of color in the image, so the eyes goes to the red first before it goes anywhere else in the painting. The middle band is the small body on the rope. Off to the upper left, hanging from a branch is what looks like a child, dark hair and facing towards us. That detail is the center of the painting, even though it sits at the edge of it, and it has a basis in the record. The Northern Crusades included mass killings and the deliberate destruction of pagan communities, children among the dead, much of it in forests like the painting is depicting. The painting's background consists mostly of the giant. At the tree line stands a giant Teutonic Ridderbruder, a brother knight of the order, in a white cloak with the black cross at the chest. He raises a war axe in one hand with two pale points of light in the helmet where the eyes would be. Różalski has rendered him half dissolved, more a standing column of fog than a man essentially. We can also see 3 more brother knights waiting smaller and dimmer back among the trees. Now, look at how the giant is standing, because the posture runs opposite to the one we just saw at the Battle of Grunwald. The Grunwald giant had a rounded back and its sword pointing down into the ground, a body already on its way to falling. This one stands fully upright, looming above the tree line with the axe still raised. Where the Battle of Grunwald caught the order in the moment it broke, Starza catches it upright and still at work, decades or more before Poland and Lithuania ever pushed it back. The Northern Crusades ran from the late 12th century into the 15th, a string of campaigns the Pope sanctioned against the last pagan people of Europe. Now, back to the painting, and specifically the cursed knight Yuan, who it sets apart from the figures behind him. The brother knights carry the black cross, and his red shield has nothing to do with the order, so he reads less as one of them than as something they've made an enemy of. That fits the rest of the series, since in another painting called Bait, the cursed knight turns up to ambush a group of brother knights, an encounter Różalski calls unpleasant, mainly for the Teutonic side. What I couldn't pin down though is what exactly Yuan is cursed with. My best guess of course is a werewolf, since that is what the whole Wolfpack series is built on, and his hands in the painting have already started to change. The rest is more of a reach. The small body hanging from the branch could be someone of his, a relative, maybe a daughter killed by the order, and the grief turning to rage might be what pulls the werewolf out of him there in the snow. That is of course a guess, not anything Różalski has put on the record. Alright, now we go a very long way east to the strangest painting of the 4 in this video. Brothers in Arms Invasion came out in July of 2020. It belongs to a long-running Różalski series about 2 characters, William, a young knight, and Scythe, a samurai. By Różalski's account, the 2 became friends after William lost his faith in the Crusades and traveled east at the end of the 13th century. One important distinction about this painting is that it breaks the compositional pattern. Where the other 3 open the field out into 3 clear bands, this painting reads in 2, the men in front and the giant behind, with almost nothing standing between them. The foreground is the 2 of them, backs to us, standing on a strip of wet ground where a windblown grass field begins. Scythe is on the left in dark red samurai armor laced with red cord. His helmet carries 2 curved horns, and he holds a sheathed sword low at his side. William is on the right, taller, in a long dark robe over chainmail. A kite shield hangs across his back with a white cross on it, and a rosary hangs at his side. The cross and the rosary are very important details, since it is the only things marking him as a Christian knight this far from home. Off at the right edge, a torii gate stands in the murk. It marks the ground as specifically Japanese and as sacred at the same time. In the background is the giant. Różalski has rendered the whole Mongol invasion as one armored figure rising out of the mist and nearly the color of it. The helmet is masked and ornamented with 2 pale eyes. The giant holds a long sword in each of his hands, both shouldered, so the blades reach out wider to either side. From the rear end of one sword, a small body hangs, the same detail Różalski gave the Teutonic giant sword at Grunwald. The other sword ends in what looks like a traditional Japanese ornament. The figure itself is so faint it reads as a stain on the fog rather than a solid form. We can also see mounted riders sitting at its feet on both sides. Likewise, a few pale birds drift across the fog around it. There's no populated middle distance here, which is part of why the giant feels so close. The 2 men have walked right up to the foot of it with open field at their backs and nothing in front. One specific detail that makes the painting very interesting is the posture of the 2 men. Neither of them is braced or mid-draw. They're standing still and looking with the body language of people who have walked to the edge of a field, seen what is waiting, and not yet worked out whether they will be alive in an hour. You could just as easily turn it around though and say they are simply unfazed, 2 veterans who have seen enough to expect they will win and do not bother bracing for it. The painting does not tell you which, and I really like that openness regarding the painting, because it leaves us the viewer with a imaginative problem we have to solve on our own. The story behind the painting mixes invention with real history. century, and Różalski is open about where that line falls. The friendship is the invented half. Różalski mentions in the painting's caption that he never bought the idea that the knights of medieval Europe and the samurai had no contact at all, so he put William and Scythe together. What the two of them are standing in front of though is real. In 1274 and again in 1281, Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, sent fleets across the sea to take the islands of Japan. The first wave carried tens of thousands of men. The second wave, 7 years later, was far larger, around 140,000 men and roughly 4,400 vessels. Several historians call it the largest seaborne invasion attempted anywhere before the 20th century. Both invasions failed though, not in quite the same way. In 1274, the Mongols landed at Hakata Bay on Kyushu, fought the samurai there and took major losses, then withdrew to their ships. Before they returned 7 years later, the Japanese built a stone wall along the bay, and in 1281 it held. The far larger fleet could find no foothold and was still at anchor when a typhoon came down on the coast and broke it apart, drowning a vast share of the men. The Japanese named the winds Kami no Kase, the divine wind, later shortened to Kamikaze. They took the storms as proof the islands were under the protection of the gods. This is where the giant in the image earns its size most directly. The invasions were essentially existential for medieval Japan in the most literal sense, since had either fleet landed and won, the country would have gone a different way entirely. So painting the Mongol army as a single giant comes closer to actual measurement than to exaggeration. Różalski adds one more wink on top of that. The caption frames the whole painting as a page from William's own journal and notes that William liked to embellish, so the giant works on two levels at once. The invasion really was large enough to bend the history of a country, and it is also the version a frightened foreigner set down on paper years later. Moving on to the last painting in this video, and this is the one where Różalski changes what the giant is made of. The painting February 25th, 1831 is depicting the battle of a name I will not try to pronounce, and it moves the whole idea out of the medieval world and into the 19th century. The painting's composition reads in three deadbands once again. The foreground is a loose line of insurgent infantry seen mostly from behind, standing in snow at the edge of a forest. They wear olive brown greatcoats with white belts crossed over the chest, brown leather packs, and tall dark caps with yellow cords. Most of them carry muskets with fixed bayonets held up at the shoulder. On two of the packs there is a red square bearing a white eagle, which places these men as poles. One soldier near the center is turned in profile, sighting down his musket, and off to the right an older figure in a dark capped coat and a bicorn hat stands among the line. A drummer waits at the far right edge of the painting with his drum slung at his hip. The middle band is the forest. Bare birches and other leafless trees stand with pale trunks going up into fog, and the snow in front of the infantry line is trampled flat where the men are standing. The background belongs to the machines, and this time the giants are iron soldiers. The largest rises out of the fog, taller than the trees, a body of iron with a tall chimney venting black smoke from the top. Two glowing amber furnace eyes sits where a head would otherwise be, and it holds a long blade in one of its iron hands. It stands on heavy mechanical legs. Around it, dimmer in the fog, are more iron soldiers, appearing smaller due to the distance, but built the same way. Behind all of them, the sky goes a faint orange near the treetops before fading down into the cold grey where the machines stand. The faint orange could hint at these iron soldiers essentially burning everything they come across, which again could be a nice metaphor for how empires usually destroys the land they are invading. Now, set this last painting against the three before it. The Teutonic Order depicted across the two paintings in the start of the video is still just a human body, whether falling at Grunwald or standing upright and dominant in the Baltic snow, and the giant depicting the Mongol fleet in Japan follows this same pattern. The machines here have gone the other way entirely. They are the first giants in this video that are machines rather than just men scaled up. This is also the only painting of the four with more than one giant in it. That fits what the painting is about, and it is also why the giants here are made of iron in the first place. The three earlier paintings sit in the medieval world where power wore armor and took the shape of a man. 1831 sits at the edge of the Industrial Age, when steam and iron were beginning to remake work, travel, and war across Europe. A force scaled up to fit that century comes out as a machine rather than just a knight. An industrial empire arrives as a column of identical iron soldiers, massed, produced, and interchangeable. That is how Różalski stages it. Różalski's caption regarding the painting is also short, and it says directly that it depicts the battle of the name that I won't try to pronounce as the largest battle of the November Uprising. The battle was fought on the 25th of February 1831 in the woods near Grochowsk on the eastern outskirts of Warsaw. It pitted a Polish army against a Russian army after Nicholas I was deposed from the Polish throne in January and the Russian crossed into Poland to crush the rising. The Poles held the woods through a day of repeated assault, and the Russians withdrew without taking Warsaw after losing somewhere near 9,500 men, and the Poles lost heavily too, enough that the Polish army could not organize a pursuit. This is also why the battle often gets called an inclusive bloodbath rather than a victory. It still saved the city of Warsaw though, and it sits today among the strongest symbols of the November Uprising. So these were the 4 paintings I had found for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe, and be sure to check out Różalski's work. As mentioned before, I have linked all of it in the description, and see you guys in the next one.